Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. I don't know what kind of rules you have for, labeling someone as such. For instance, if someone lies to you, or at least you have a feeling that that person is a weasel, how many tries you give that person? One try, and then you say, okay, this is a bad guy, I should not deal with him, or I should treat him as such. 2 times, 3 times, how many times? 1,000 times? I usually have about 3 times. So I get fooled 2 times. If the person tries the 3rd time, seems to be like a pattern to me. The same thing when you try to make a point. If someone comes and has a discussion with you and says, well, this is my point, and you say, well, just a second, I think this is a weasel point. And the person says, you think, oh, this is my assessment. I think you're just trying to, and you give a chance to that person to explain or give you details. Maybe you didn't understand it. Maybe it was misunderstanding. And if that person continues to act in a weaselship way, then that person is a weasel. That's it. That's how I do. Now we have here the president-elect of the Czech Republic, who, when he first came into my radar, he won the elections, and he was not yet sworn in, and he made some statements. He was the general in NATO, something like that. So I said, well, okay, he made some statements regarding, eventually Ukraine must negotiate with the Russians and so on, something like this, which was a very unpopular statement made by, a vassal state, president. So I said, the guy really has I don't want to say open mind, because I don't like that kind of expression. Because nowadays, open-mindedness, meaning accepting someone's perversity or whatever is tried to be imposed on you. It's not like, hey, you think about it, please consider it. That would be an open mind. With an open mind, assess the situation, and then say, okay, I disagree with your proposal. You had your open mind, but you didn't accept it. Well, they consider open-mindedness if you accept anything they say. Well, that's not it. So anyway, back to this guy. So I was looking at this guy. He's, I think, logical, because he assesses from a military standpoint the Russians cannot be defeated, they have nuclear weapons and so on. Well, he was bombarded with that. He went from 0, like not knowing him, to about 8 from 10 out of 10. I said, oh, okay, this guy. And then he came with some statements, dropped to 6, 4, now is at negative. And this last article, last statements right now, he's a weasel. That's it. Stamp weasel with weasel on it. Pop right there on his paperwork. Dismissed. Why? Because he made some statements on the 15th this month, stating that the Russian citizens should be monitored in Czech Republic because of the war in Ukraine. And I made a video on that, and I will show you the little thing here. I made a video of that on the 15th, stating that Russians in West, this is what he said, I'm quoting, Russians in West should be monitored more. Czech president. And I said concentration camp next. And in this video from the 15th, I was making the case that, and I was using the Japanese internment camps, concentration camps, because you concentrate people over there to keep them away from the rest of society under arrest. That's internment. And you concentrate them, that means bring them together. I use the definitions in my video just to make sure I cover my ass, as one of my bosses used to say. Cover your tail, Emil, cover your tail. Wait for this, I'm not gonna stick my neck out then, ever. Nevertheless, let's go back to these guys. And I was using the fact that yes, this is what the Americans did, but they did it to the Japanese, and they did it to, not internment camp, but they quarantined certain German communities, one in Michigan, in Frankenmuth, during the Second World War. They quarantined it. That means they surrounded it, they couldn't get in and out. Read about it. Frankenmuth, north of Flint, by Saginaw. These are towns. people not familiar with the towns here. So anyway, I know because I visited that town and there's inscriptions over there and you can read about it. And then I read about it and I realized, okay. Now, the difference here is that, not the difference, my point was that the Japanese were gathered, concentrated, taken into that camp, in those camps, and then they released after the war. But United States was at war with Japan. Okay, let's see what this Weasel, because I'm going to call him Weasel from now on because he's a weasel, because this attempt earned the stamp of Weasel. All right, ready, set, and go. Obviously comes from Russia Today. Czech leader explains call to monitor Russian citizens. This is from June 18th, 2023. This Pavel. President Pavel has denied suggesting that Russians should be treated like interned Japanese Americans during World War II. Well, remember, concentration camps next. That's my point. This is just the first step. You're going to go to that with this kind of mentality. That was my point. If this mentality, step 2 will be that one, or could be, not will, could be. Most very probable. Czech President Pavel has partially, remember this is Russia Today, walked back his call for a broad surveillance of Russians living in the West. And I'm quoting Pavel. Monitoring does not mean that every Russian citizen should be monitored. Pavel told CNN. What it means is general monitoring of what is going on in that community and a response to behavioral risk factors. All right, now we go down here, and this is what he is arguing in relation to the Japanese internment camps, which I think that he is a weasel, right here. It says, Pavel argued on Sunday that the historical parallel he drew earlier, and I'm quoting, certainly did not sound like an endorsement or even a suggestion that we should go do the same path. He insisted that he only mentioned the World War II era internment in order to provide, I'm quoting, historical context in describing past restrictions imposed on, and this is the key sentence, citizens of a country that is waging a war. And here yes, my man, that's true. But the big difference between what you say here, the context, citizens of a country that is waging a war, was made between two countries that were at war. So it's like the Ukrainians will start monitoring the Russians, and the Russians should start monitoring the Ukrainians, which actually happens. Okay? So I understand that, but the big difference here is you say the West, which we know the West is the best. Get here and we'll do the rest. Right? Jim Morrison, right at the end, the Doors song. So he's talking about the West. I don't remember the West declaring war on Russia or the Russia declaring war on the West, or the West being at war with Russia. Therefore, my man, you talk about something that really is parallel. You talk about people at work, that's what you said here, citizens of a country that is waging a war against the country that makes the decision of Japanese American community being taken into the internment camps. And besides that, let me tell you this is exactly the point I was making in my video on the 15th. Speaking to Radio Free Europe / Radio Liberty on Thursday, Pavel called for stricter monitoring of Russians because of the armed conflict with Ukraine. Yes, between Ukraine and Russia, like it was between USA and Japan. I didn't hear about Argentina monitoring and interning or getting Japanese, how should I put it, the community from Argentina into internment camps, as you suggest, to monitor them. I haven't heard Romanians or Romania monitoring any Japanese over there in Romania, if ever, because Japan was at war with United States. So I know what you're talking about. You're a weasel. Your logic here is not fair. It's not, how should I put it, it has a lot of flaws here. And let me tell you about the Japanese internment camp, which I made the same point in my video. He drew a comparison to the mass internment of Japanese Americans in the US during World War II. In 1988, and I mentioned that, not the exact date, or the President Ronald Reagan apologized to the Japanese American community. That means you recognize something you did wrong. But he did it in the name of the state of the United States, not of every citizen. He said that and signed a law that offered compensation to surviving victims. That means he gave something to some people that he wronged, not he, but the country, according to Ronald Reagan. So they recognize, as I said, compensation and apologies. That means you agree that that was wrong. So you got it wrong, Mr. Pavel. You are not at war with Russia. So your thing here, historical context, is very, you took, I don't want to say compare apples with whatever, but citizens of a country that was waging war. United States and Japan, and the guy already here, he recognized that was a mistake. So either way you want to turn it, Mr. Pavel, first, you are not at war with Russia. Secondly, if you think about it, to give the context was wrong. And that was recognized by the President of the United States of America and offered compensation. I think it was about 15,000 petty dollars. That's how much was the compensation. You feel like throwing up about that compensation. So that guy, for me, he needs a lot of truth telling in order to get back from negative 55 back to at least 0, which is like neutral for me. Because 0 is no negative, no positive. Sorry, lost another one. He was at 8 at my first encounter with him. So this is a leader who is either evil or stupid, or maybe both, because he didn't realize whatever he said. Remember, this comes from Russia Today. So maybe Russia Today, but this is, again, why should I try to... I'm just confessing this to you right now. Why should I try to give Pavel, maybe a little escape door and say, maybe it was the Russia Today who made this? No, I'm not going to do that. You know why? Because he already up with the first article, with the monitoring. And whatever he said over here, I'm going to say, maybe the Russians from Russia Today put the sentence in such a way, and his quotes, the statements that made me an idiot, So I'm not gonna make myself idiot. I'm not gonna make the Russians Today idiot because he's a weasel. He's a weasel from the article I already mentioned. So, don't do this. Oh, maybe it was not him. Try to give justifications. Take it as it is. He's a weasel. He's a weasel. And he's not only a weasel. He's illogical, or he's logical, but he's saying that thinking that we're not going to catch him. Well, I'm guaranteeing you that a lot of people will not catch that. Will say, oh yeah, it was the context. No, it was not the context. It was not the context. It's like you have a girlfriend and a boyfriend versus a wife and a husband. That's a little bit different, don't you think? Yes, it is a little bit related, but still you're not the same in many ways. Just a little comparison, or anyway, analogy, which I didn't give it. I just gave an example of how I think separate, and even more separate, these two things are. Those things, Japan and USA were at war, declared war. These guys are not, the West and Russia. So from the very beginning is, what the fuck are you talking about, Pavel? He was a general in NATO. So I think, I don't want to say I think anything about this. Just leave it as it is. You make your own judgment after this guy. But for me, dismissed. Weasel. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.